Right. That's right, Leon. We were getting lots of questions about, I'm noticing different birds or bees or whatever in my backyard, or different fish species turning up, or they might have been working in an agricultural setting and talking about the timing of flowering and saying, are all these things that local people are seeing useful to scientists, or is it really only scientific information by trained scientists that's actually useful? And so I've got a marine example for you to show that the observations of local people is incredibly useful to us as scientists. And the example I've got is a marine project for Australia. You might remember the slide I showed earlier about how species are changing distribution. Now, we've got a coastline in Australia of around 40,000, 60,000 kilometres long, depending on how you measure it. You can imagine trying to track the distribution of species around our coastline would be incredibly, or is incredibly, labour intensive. And we do have some fantastic monitoring projects, but they're not as comprehensive or as detailed as we like. But we thought, and that's nothing I touched, maybe it was, maybe I'm lying. We thought, imagine if we could get just a small percentage of the observations of people like you that are out fishing and diving around the coast, get those verified by scientists. What would that be able to tell us about how species are changing distribution? So we started a project called RedMap Australia, or the Range Extension Database and Mapping Project, that started right here in Tasmania, and now it's gone around the coast of Australia, and it's been incredibly useful in helping us understand how the distribution of species in our marine systems are changing over time. So what happens, you might see a species that you think or know is unusual when you're out at your shack over Easter having a bit of a fish. You take a photo, send it in to us, and every observation that we get sent is verified by a scientist. It's put up on the website, and then over time we're able to see how patterns are changing. And so it's essentially taking observations and pictures from the community and turning that into data. And if you can have a look at this map, each one of those numbers in there are the numbers of unusual observations that people like you have sent in around Australia. And we've been able to use those observations in around 25 different scientific articles that have really helped us understand how species are changing distributions around the Australian coast. So what happens with the observations that people like you send in is we use that as an early indication of where we might need to do a more thorough investigation. So it helps us, rather than trying to find a needle in a haystack, we get an early indication of how things are changing. And so I've got a local example for you, and that's the gloomy octopus. This was a species normally only found in New South Wales and then starting to move into Victoria. We started to get observations of this species through the RedMap website. People weren't sure though, maybe it had been here before, but we weren't, we just hadn't seen the observations of it, which is entirely possible. So not everything unusual that turns up is a climate change signal. We always look for other explanations, which is exactly what we did with this octopus species. We got a student onto the project. He looked at the genetics, the population genetic structure of this octopus throughout its whole range and in the new part of its range in Tasmania, or what we thought might be the new part of the range. And the genetics actually showed that had been a really recent rapid range extension into the north coast of Tasmania. And this species is now 13% of the octopus fishery in that region, and we're getting observations of it all the way down the southeast of Tasmania. So that's one example of how local observations from people can be really helpful and informative for understanding climate change. But there are many other examples. Bird watchers, for example, have put together globally one of the most comprehensive databases that we have that have been incredibly influential in helping scientists understand how climate change is affecting the patterns of birds, for example. And then there are millions of other, maybe not millions, but lots of other citizen science projects around the world that are gathering information that's incredibly useful for understanding different aspects of climate change.